The galaxy had known peace for centuries, with the Drexian Empire sitting at the top of the food chain. Their fleets were vast, their technology far beyond anything other species could fathom, and their reputation for ruthlessness was unmatched. Other species trembled at the mere mention of the Drexians. They ruled with an iron fist, crushing any resistance before it could take root. There was no force in the galaxy that dared to challenge their dominance. But in the quiet corners of space, something was stirring, something the Drexians never expected. It began as a whisper, a faint signal lost in the noise of the cosmos. At first, the Drexians ignored it, dismissing it as another miscalculation or a glitch in their sensors. They were confident, assured in their superiority. But as the signal persisted, something changed. It wasn't just a random anomaly. The signal was coming from Earth. The planet, once considered insignificant and primitive, had been growing in silence for centuries. Its people had once been confined to their small world, unaware of the vastness of space. They had barely reached the stars when the Drexians first conquered the galaxy. And yet this small, seemingly inconsequential planet was now sending out strange, encrypted messages that were slowly beginning to catch the attention of the Drexians. Captain Zoran, a high-ranking officer in the Drexian fleet, was the first to notice the pattern. He was a battle-hardened warrior, never one to be caught off guard. He had crushed rebellions, obliterated entire fleets, and seen civilizations fall beneath the Drexian boot. Nothing ever fazed him. But when the signal kept appearing on his screens, day after day, his interest peaked. There was something about it that seemed off. He called in his officers for a meeting, his sharp eyes scanning the data. "What do we make of this?" he asked, his voice calm but laced with an edge of curiosity. One of the officers, a young technician named Vera, stepped forward. "It's coming from Earth, sir. A small, insignificant planet. We thought it was just an old human broadcast at first, but these signals are getting stronger, more consistent." Zoran frowned, a rare expression on his face. "And you believe this planet has the means to send out such advanced signals?" Vyra hesitated for a moment. I'm not sure, sir, but the frequency and precision of the signal suggests something more than just a simple transmission." Zoran thought for a moment, his mind racing. He knew that the humans had been a primitive species when they were first discovered, a species that had no hope of ever becoming a threat. But in the years since, something had changed. The humans had developed technology quickly, much faster than any of the Drexians had anticipated. They had mastered space travel, but that had never worried the Drexians. The galaxy was vast, and Earth was a tiny speck in the grand scheme of things. Still, this was different. The signal from Earth was something they could not ignore. It was precise, purposeful. The humans were sending a message, but to whom? And why? "Track the signal," Zoran commanded, his tone firm. "I want to know exactly where it's coming from. If this is a trap, we will deal with it. But if this is something more, I want to know everything about it." The officers nodded, immediately turning to their consoles. As the Drexians began to analyze the signal, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. This was no ordinary transmission. But Zoran, being the experienced commander that he was, refused to let any hint of doubt show on his face. He had fought too many battles, seen too many enemies fall, to be swayed by the unknown. As hours passed, the signal grew stronger, more detailed. Zoran's crew worked tirelessly to decode it, and finally, the message became clear. It wasn't a warning, as they had initially thought. It wasn't a plea for help. It was a declaration from humanity that they were no longer content to remain hidden in the shadows of the galaxy. The message read, "We are coming. Prepare yourselves." Zoran stared at the message in silence. His mind raced, trying to process what he had just read. How could this be? The humans, so small, so insignificant, were daring to challenge the might of the Drexian Empire. The news spread quickly throughout the Drexian ranks. Rumors began to swirl. Some believed it was a bluff, a mistake, a misinterpretation of the data. Others, like Zoran, couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The humans had always been seen as weak, but this was different. They were no longer just survivors. They were making their move. Zoran knew one thing for sure. If humanity was truly rising, the Drexians would have to face their worst nightmare. It was a nightmare that no one had seen coming, not even the mighty Drexians themselves. As Zoran sat in his command chair, staring at the message, a single thought echoed in his mind. What have we awoken? The Drexian Empire had faced countless threats in its long history, but none had ever come from a species as small, as primitive, and as underestimated as humanity. To the Drexians, humans had always been a curiosity, an insignificant species struggling on a forgotten planet. But the message they had received sent ripples through the entire empire. The humans were not asking for help. They were not begging for mercy. They were declaring war. Captain Zoran sat in the command center of his flagship, his mind still racing. The signal was still on his screen, a constant reminder that the galaxy was no longer a place of peace for the Drexians. Humanity had shown the first sign of defiance, and that alone was enough to shake the foundations of the empire. Zoran knew that his first course of action was clear. He needed to investigate Earth and determine whether this was a real threat or just an empty declaration. "Prepare the fleet," Zoran ordered, his voice cold and steady. "We're heading to Earth." His officers responded immediately, their movements swift and practiced as they made preparations for the journey. Despite their initial disbelief, the Drexians had to acknowledge that the humans were now a force to be reckoned with. They had made their move, and it was time to see what humanity was truly capable of. As the fleet set course for Earth, Zoran couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach. There was something different about this situation, something unsettling. The message had been too confident, too bold for a species that had always been on the fringe of galactic affairs. But then again, perhaps that was the human way. They had always defied expectations. Days passed as the fleet traveled across the galaxy, and Zoran spent every moment poring over the intelligence reports. Earth, from all accounts, had been an unremarkable planet, a backwater world on the edge of a galaxy filled with far more advanced civilizations. But now, the humans had done the impossible. They had sent a message that was bold and precise. They had declared that they were coming, and the Drexians were bracing for whatever that meant. Finally, the Drexian fleet entered the solar system. Zoran's eyes narrowed as the planets came into view. Earth was just a speck in the distance, but the moment he set his sights on it, everything seemed to shift. The galaxy had always been a vast and empty place, but now it felt smaller. The sense of certainty that the Drexians had always carried with them was beginning to crack. As they approached Earth, Zoran gave the order to deploy a fleet of reconnaissance ships. He needed to know exactly what humanity had been hiding, and why they had suddenly chosen to make their presence known. The Drexians had always assumed that Earth was little more than a curiosity, but now they were realizing that they might have underestimated the humans in a way they had never imagined. The first reconnaissance ship returned after hours of scanning Earth's atmosphere and surface. The officer aboard the ship was visibly shaken as he reported to Zoran. "Captain, you need to see this." Zoran rushed to the command center, his mind already racing with possibilities. What could the humans possibly have done to cause such concern among his officers? When he saw the image on the screen, his blood ran cold. The image was of a fleet that had been hidden from the galaxy's eyes for centuries. It was a fleet that could rival the most advanced armadas in the galaxy, and it was floating just beyond Earth's orbit. This is impossible," Zoran muttered under his breath. His eyes widened as he processed the scale of what he was seeing. The fleet was ancient, but it was undeniably human in design. And it was massive, far larger than any fleet the Drexians had ever encountered. It was clear that the humans had been preparing for this moment for a long time, perhaps longer than anyone had imagined. They had hidden this fleet away, waiting for the right moment to reveal it to the galaxy. Zeren couldn't fathom how the humans had built such a fleet or how they had kept it hidden from the rest of the galaxy. But the answer was clear. Earth had been quietly preparing for war. Zeren's mind raced as he tried to piece together the puzzle. If the humans had built a fleet this powerful in secret, what else were they capable of? The Drexians had long considered themselves the undisputed masters of the galaxy, but this revelation changed everything. For the first time in Zeren's life, he felt the sting of doubt. "Prepare for immediate contact," Zeren ordered. "We can't waste any more time." The Drexians moved into formation, their ships positioning themselves to make a direct approach toward Earth. Zeren stood at the forefront of his flagship, his eyes fixed on the planet that had once seemed so insignificant. Now, it was the center of the galaxy's attention. As the fleet moved closer, Zeren couldn't help but wonder just what kind of force the humans were. What had driven them to hide this powerful fleet for so long? Why had they waited until now to show their true strength? And more importantly, how would the Drexians respond to the challenge? The galaxy's deadliest species had been caught off guard, and now, for the first time, they were about to face the consequences of underestimating humanity. But Zeren knew one thing for certain. The Drexians had made a grave mistake, and it was a mistake they would soon regret. As the Drexian fleet drew closer to Earth, Captain Zeren stood at the command center, his mind in turmoil. He had expected to find a primitive world, full of underdeveloped life forms, with little more than simple tools and small-scale technology. Instead, what he had discovered was something entirely different, a hidden force that not only rivaled Drexian technology, but might even surpass it. He paced back and forth, trying to absorb the gravity of the situation. His officers, usually so confident, now stood silent, their faces etched with concern. No one had expected the humans to be capable of such a feat. In all of the galaxy's history, no species had ever been able to hide a fleet of this magnitude, especially not one so advanced. "We've misjudged them," one of his senior officers said quietly, as if reading Zeren's thoughts. "They've been hiding this fleet right under our noses." Zeren clenched his fists, anger rising in him. How could we not have noticed? "Perhaps we underestimated them," the officer responded. "We thought them insignificant. We've never even bothered to consider Earth a true threat." Zeren's eyes narrowed. That ends today. The question now wasn't how humanity had managed to keep their fleet a secret for so long. The question was how the Drexian Empire would respond to the reality that a species once considered nothing more than an afterthought was now a true power in the galaxy. "Prepare for a full-scale scan of Earth," Zeren ordered, his voice steady but sharp. "I want to know everything. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of technology the humans have. We need to know what we're dealing with before we make our next move." As the scans went out, Zeren felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. This was no longer just about Earth. This was about the future of the Drexian Empire. He had spent his entire career rising through the ranks, battling for power, and ensuring that the Drexian Empire remained the dominant force in the galaxy. But now his position was threatened, and not by some unknown alien species, but by humans. The Drexian fleet had always been a symbol of strength, invincible in its own right. But now, the tables had turned. The humans had the advantage, and Zeren knew it. He watched as the data on Earth's fleet continued to flow onto the screen, and it became clear that this was no ordinary force. The ships were massive, each one a testament to human ingenuity. They were old, but still deadly. The Drexian scans revealed something else as well, a signal emanating from Earth. It was a message, but not one that the Drexians could easily interpret. The technology was unlike anything the Drexians had encountered before. It was complex, almost alien. Zeren's brow furrowed in confusion. What kind of technology were humans hiding? How could they have developed something so advanced in secret? The message was brief but chilling. It was not a request for negotiation. It was not a plea for help. It was a simple declaration. We are coming. Zaren's grip tightened around the armrest of his chair. A shiver ran down his spine. For the first time in his life, he felt a deep sense of uncertainty. The humans were no longer a curious anomaly. They were a force to be reckoned with, and as their fleet moved toward them, Zaren realized that the Drexian Empire might not be ready for what was coming. "Captain," one of his officers said, pulling him from his thoughts, "we've detected something unusual. The humans have activated a defense grid around their fleet. It's unlike anything we've seen before." Zaren's heart skipped a beat. A defense grid. Something that could protect their fleet. He had underestimated the humans more than he realized. Their ingenuity was more than just weaponry. They had created a defense system capable of holding off even the most advanced armies in the galaxy. "Activate the fleet's shields," Zaren ordered. "Prepare for combat. We may not be able to reason with them. If the humans are willing to fight, then we will need to meet them head-on." The Drexian ships moved into position, readying their weapons and shields. Zaren watched as the Earth fleet's defense grid shimmered on his screen, a powerful barrier of energy surrounding the human vessels. His mind raced. The humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something more, something Zaren couldn't quite grasp. But he knew that it was something worth fighting for. As the two fleets moved closer, Zaren felt the weight of history on his shoulders. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Humanity had dared to stand against the Drexians, and the consequences of that decision would be felt throughout the galaxy. And Zaren knew this. Whatever happened next, the Drexians were not prepared for what the humans had in store. In the silence that filled the command center, Zaren felt the tension in the air. He could feel the unease spreading among his crew. The Drexians were about to face a force they could never have imagined, a species that had been underestimated for far too long. And now, humanity was ready to show them what they were truly capable of. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The air on the Drexian flagship crackled with tension. Captain Zaren stood at the helm, his sharp gaze fixed on the advancing human fleet. Across the vast expanse of space, the human ships gleamed like ghosts in the dark, their lights blinking with a steady rhythm. Behind them, their powerful defense grid shimmered ominously, a barrier so strong it could hold off even the most powerful of attacks. Zaren's mind raced as he took in the full scope of the situation. The humans were not just a threat. They were a challenge unlike any the Drexian Empire had faced before. This wasn't about simply conquering a planet anymore. It was about surviving a confrontation that could alter the balance of power in the galaxy. "Captain, we've completed our scans," one of his officers said, breaking the silence. "The humans are using an unknown form of energy. Their shields are not like ours. They've adapted their technology in ways we can't predict." Zaren didn't need to hear more. He knew that the humans had been hiding something far greater than anyone had anticipated. What were they preparing for? What had they been doing in secret all these years? "Activate the disruptors," Zaren ordered firmly. "We'll breach their shields and force them into submission. They'll learn that they were never meant to challenge the Drexians." The Drexian ships powered up, their weapons locking into position. The quiet hum of their engines filled the command room. Zaren's heart pounded in his chest as the moment of confrontation drew near. He glanced at the officer next to him, who nervously wiped his forehead. "Captain, the humans. They're doing something." They're not moving," the officer reported. "Their fleet has stopped." Zaren blinked, disbelief sweeping over him. The human fleet had halted, as though they were waiting for something. "Are they retreating?" Zaren asked, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "They can't be. They don't know how." But as he looked closer, he realized something even more unnerving. The human ships weren't retreating. They were preparing. Every ship's engines powered down, and the eerie silence of space seemed to deepen. "Captain," another officer said, her voice tinged with apprehension. "The human fleet. They've activated something. I think they've launched some kind of weapon. A bright flash exploded in the distance, blindingly intense, as if the stars themselves had suddenly exploded. It was unlike anything Zoran had ever seen. A massive burst of energy that expanded outward in a perfect sphere, rippling through space with terrifying speed. The human weapon was not just a blast of energy. It was a force that seemed to bend the very fabric of space. "What is that?" Zoran exclaimed, a chill running down his spine. The Drexian ships began to tremble as the wave of energy passed through them. Their systems malfunctioned, shields flickering and communication lines crackling with static. Zoran's eyes widened in shock. The weapon wasn't just powerful, it was disruptive. It didn't just destroy, it disoriented. It destabilized everything in its path. "Increase power to the shields. Now," Zoran barked. But it was too late. The wave hit, and Zoran felt the entire ship lurch under the force of the blast. Systems began to shut down, and the Drexian fleet was thrown into chaos. For a moment, Zoran could do nothing but watch as his ships faltered in the wake of the human assault. The humans had struck first, and they had struck hard. "Damage report," Zoran shouted, struggling to regain control of the situation. "Multiple ships reporting critical failures," the officer replied. "Shields are down. Weapons systems offline. We've lost contact with several vessels." Zoran clenched his teeth. The Drexians were not accustomed to losing control, especially not to a species they had once deemed insignificant. He had believed that the Drexian fleet was invincible, but the humans had shattered that illusion in a single devastating strike. "Return fire. Bring our disruptors online," Zoran growled, his rage boiling over. But even as he issued the orders, Zoran knew that the battle was far from over. The humans had taken the first blow, but Zoran was determined not to let them win. His fleet would retaliate. It had to. "We can't let them break us," Zoran muttered to himself, steeling his resolve. "They are not as strong as we are." But even as he said the words, doubt began to creep into his mind. The humans were no longer the primitive species they had once seemed. They were powerful, creative, and most terrifying of all, unpredictable. The Drexian fleet slowly began to regain its footing, the ships pulling back into formation. Zoran felt a momentary surge of confidence as his fleet regrouped, ready to strike back. The battle was far from over. But the question remained, could the Drexians overcome the humans' power, or had they already lost? The battle lines were drawn, and the fate of the galaxy now rested in the balance. The Drexian fleet slowly gathered itself after the devastating energy blast. While the immediate threat had been neutralized, the damage had been done. Captain Zoran stood before the command center, his eyes fixed on the screen that displayed the situation. His hands were clenched tightly, but there was a deep sense of uncertainty now. The humans had proven they weren't just survivors, they were warriors. "Captain, the humans. They're preparing something else," one of his officers reported, fear creeping into her voice. Zoran's gaze snapped to the screen. The human fleet was regrouping, not fleeing or running, but preparing for another attack. They were relentless, but more than that, they were resourceful. He knew the Drexian forces were strong, but this wasn't a simple enemy. It wasn't a foe they could defeat with sheer might alone. It was an adversary driven by something deeper, something Zoran couldn't yet understand. "We can't afford to underestimate them," Zoran said, his voice strained. "Increase the frequency of our scans. I want to know everything about their next move." As the seconds ticked by, Zoran's mind raced. He thought back to the human message, the one that had sent a chill down his spine when he had first read it. "We are coming." What did it mean? Was this just a display of defiance, or was it a declaration of war? And if so, what would the humans do next? Suddenly, a new transmission crackled through the Drexian communications channel. Zoran turned sharply, staring at the words that appeared on the screen. It was another message from Earth, but this time, it was different. There were no threats, no boasts of power. The message was simple, direct, and unsettling. This is humanity's warning. Do not mistake our silence for weakness. You will soon understand the true cost of your invasion. Zaran's mind whirled. This wasn't just a warning. This was a promise that the humans had something far greater planned, something that could turn the tide of this battle in their favor. What do they mean by that? One of his officers asked, clearly disturbed by the message. I don't know, Zaran admitted, a rare flicker of uncertainty in his voice. But we need to be ready for anything. Just as the words left his mouth, the quiet hum of the Drexian fleet's engines grew louder. Zaran's eyes widened as he watched the human fleet slowly, deliberately, begin to advance. There was no hesitation, no fear. They were coming toward him, and this time, they weren't waiting for a confrontation. They were preparing for it. All ships, prepare for combat, Zaran ordered sharply. Engage weapons and activate shields. We won't give them another chance to strike first. The Drexian fleet shifted into battle formation, weapons ready, shields charged. But as Zaran watched the human ships grow closer, something unsettling began to form in his mind, a feeling he had never experienced before. It was the feeling of being outmatched. The humans weren't merely fighting to defend their planet. They weren't even fighting for survival. They were fighting to prove something, to send a message not just to the Drexians, but to the entire galaxy. And in that moment, Zaran realized just how much humanity had been underestimated. As the two fleets neared each other, Zaran's grip tightened on the armrest of his chair. The space between them was shrinking rapidly, and soon they would be close enough for the first strike. Zaran's tactical officer began issuing final commands as the Drexian fleet readied itself. Captain, the humans are aligning their ships in an unusual pattern, the officer said, looking at the tactical map. It seems almost like a formation we've never seen before. It's as if they're preparing for something larger. Zaran's eyes narrowed. What were the humans planning? Had they been holding back? Was this their true power? He didn't have time to dwell on it. Focus on their flagship, Zaran ordered. If we take it down, we cripple their command structure. But even as he gave the order, he could sense the uncertainty creeping into his officers' minds. They had been so confident before, so sure of their victory. But now, they had encountered an enemy unlike any they had faced before. The humans were proving to be far more capable, far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The human fleet came into full view now, their ships arranged in a tight, well-coordinated formation. Zaran could see the power in their movements, the precision in their tactics. These humans were far from helpless. They were a force that had been lying in wait, and now they were ready to strike with everything they had. All weapons fire on my command, Zaran said, his voice now cold with determination. But before he could give the order, something strange happened. The human ships shifted positions once more, and then, without warning, a massive pulse of energy shot out from their flagship. It wasn't just a single blast. It was a wave, a vast surge of power that spread across the entire battlefield, hitting every Drexian ship in its path. The Drexian shields flared under the pressure, barely holding against the onslaught. Zaran's heart raced as he watched the human weapon unfold. This was no ordinary attack. It was something designed not just to damage. It was designed to overwhelm, to dismantle, to break down the very foundation of the Drexian fleet. Shield failure imminent, one of the officers yelled. The pulse is too powerful. We can't hold them off. Zaran's mind spun as the realization hit him. The humans weren't just fighting to win. They were fighting to crush them, to show them that their dominance in the galaxy was over. The Drexian fleet was in chaos now, the impact of the human weapon reverberating through the ships. Zaran's hands trembled as he issued orders, but it was clear. The tide of battle had turned. The humans were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for victory, and the Drexians were losing. The Drexian fleet was reeling from the devastating pulse that had reverberated through their ships, causing system failures, disabling weapons, and sending entire ships spiraling into chaos. Captain Zaran stood at the helm of his command ship, struggling to maintain control over his rattled fleet. The humans, once thought to be insignificant, had struck with a force that was impossible to ignore. Zaran had underestimated them, and now his fleet was paying the price. "Captain, our systems are failing across multiple sectors," one of the officers reported, her voice tinged with panic. "Weapons are offline. Shields are malfunctioning. We can't hold out much longer." Zaran gripped the console before him, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. He had to act fast, but it was becoming increasingly clear that the humans were not going to give them any time to recover. They were relentless, pressing their advantage, and showing no signs of backing down. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment all along. "Recalibrate the shields," Zaran commanded through clenched teeth. "Redirect all remaining energy to the weapon systems. We need to retaliate now." But as the Drexian fleet struggled to regain its footing, the human ships did something that sent a chill down Zaran's spine. They formed a tight, strategic formation, a wall of ships, each one moving with perfect precision. It was a tactic unlike anything Zaran had ever seen before. The humans weren't just reacting to the situation. They were controlling it. They were shaping the battle. And with each passing moment, the Drexians were losing ground. The human fleet began moving in synchrony, advancing with a precision that made Zaran question everything he had thought he knew about their capabilities. They weren't panicking. They weren't scrambling. They were adapting to the situation, each maneuver calculated, every move designed to drive the Drexians further back. It was as if the humans had been born for this very moment. Zaran's mind raced. The fear that had begun to creep in during the initial assault was now overwhelming. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a struggle for dominance, and the humans were proving themselves to be an unstoppable force. "Prepare for their next strike," Zaran shouted, though the words felt hollow as he said them. The truth was clear. His fleet was on the back foot. The humans were no longer just defending their world. They were fighting for something bigger. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy itself. Suddenly, a new signal appeared on the display. It was another transmission from Earth. This time, it was a message to all the fleets of the Drexian Empire. "We are not the invaders. We are the guardians of our world. You came to conquer, but you will leave with the understanding that humanity does not kneel." Zaran's breath caught in his throat as the message echoed through the command center. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was enormous. It was a statement of defiance, a declaration of war, not only against the Drexians, but against anyone who dared challenge humanity's place in the galaxy. For a moment, Zaran felt as though the entire universe had shifted. He had always believed the Drexian Empire was the apex of power, that no species could stand in their way. But the humans were proving him wrong, and the realization was dawning on him. They weren't just fighting for their survival, they were fighting to redefine the balance of power across the galaxy. Zaran shook his head, trying to refocus. His fleet was in disarray, but they weren't finished yet. There had to be a way to turn the tide. There had to be a way to show the humans that the Drexians were the true rulers of this galaxy. "Bring all ships into close formation," Zaran ordered, his voice strained but steady. "We will face them head-on. Prepare the anti-ship missiles. We strike first, and we strike hard." The Drexian ships moved into position, their weapons primed and ready. Zaran's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the human ships approach, their formations still impenetrable, still precise. They weren't retreating, they weren't afraid. They were coming for him, for his fleet, and they would not stop until they had secured victory. As the Drexian ships powered up their weapons, Zaran's mind raced. He had no doubt that the humans would retaliate with their own devastating force. The question now was whether the Drexian fleet could withstand another of their attacks, or whether it was already too late. The tension in the air was palpable. The two fleets, once at a distance, now closed in on each other, their weapons locked and loaded. Zeren felt a cold sweat forming on the back of his neck as the moment of truth approached. The battle would soon begin in earnest, and he had no idea what the outcome would be. But as the human fleet moved closer, Zeren saw something that made his heart stop. The humans weren't just preparing for combat. They were preparing for something far more devastating. From the front lines of their fleet, a massive energy surge began to build. It was unlike anything he had seen before. An immense wave of power, gathering strength at an alarming rate. "Captain, we need to move," an officer screamed. "They're going to fire again." It was too late. The human weapon unleashed a burst of energy that tore through space like a storm. Zeren watched in horror as the wave of destruction collided with the Drexian fleet. Ships shattered, debris flew through space, and the once proud Drexian fleet began to break apart under the force of the attack. The realization hit him with a sickening clarity. The Drexians had underestimated humanity, and now it might be too late to do anything about it. The aftermath of the human assault left the Drexian fleet in ruins. Where once mighty ships had stood, now only fragmented debris floated aimlessly in the void. Zeren's command ship had been severely damaged, but remained intact, though it was a hollow victory. His once proud fleet was decimated, and their strength had been broken. It was a staggering defeat, a defeat that came at the hands of a species that had, until now, been viewed as insignificant. Zeren stood before the shattered view screen of his bridge, watching the carnage unfold. The hum of the damaged systems echoed in the background, but it was the silence that followed the destruction that filled the air. The Drexian Empire had been defeated, and the realization that this battle was only the beginning of humanity's rise began to sink in. We were not prepared for this," Zeren muttered, barely able to comprehend the devastation. He had believed that the Drexians were invincible, that their might would overwhelm any species they encountered. But the humans had shattered that illusion. They were no longer the quiet, insignificant beings they had once been. The rise of humanity had begun, and with it came the knowledge that no one would ever view them the same way again. "Captain," an officer called out, breaking the silence. "The remaining ships are retreating. They've lost communication with the rest of the Empire. The fleet is in disarray. The galaxy is ours to shape." Zeren turned slowly, his face pale with disbelief. He had seen what the humans were capable of, and now he understood. They were not merely fighting for survival. They were fighting to claim their place in the galaxy. Humanity's victory wasn't just about defeating the Drexian fleet. It was about rewriting the very laws of power in the galaxy. The human ships that had once seemed outclassed by the might of the Drexians now sailed through space like champions. Their confidence was undeniable. It was clear that they had not only overcome a great enemy, but had gained something far more valuable: respect. Respect that would echo throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Zeren's mind swirled with thoughts of the future. The Drexians had failed to conquer Earth, and the humans had made it clear that any attempt to challenge them would result in catastrophic consequences. The galaxy had been forever changed by this encounter, and the Drexians were not the ones who would control its fate. Humanity would rise, and they would shape the galaxy in their image. As the human fleet moved through the void, Zeren understood something crucial. The rise of humanity was not just an event. It was a turning point, a moment when everything that had been assumed about the balance of power in the galaxy was shattered. The humans were no longer just survivors. They were conquerors in their own right, and they had proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Back on Earth, the news of their victory spread like wildfire. Across the planet, people rejoiced. Their bravery, their ingenuity, and their ability to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds had led them to victory. Earth was no longer just a speck in the vastness of space. It was a symbol of hope, strength, and determination. The galaxy would soon know the name of humanity, and it would be impossible to forget. As Zeren stood on the bridge of his crippled ship, he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had awakened, and their message had been clear. They would not be silenced, they would not be conquered, and they would fight for their place in the stars. The Drexians had learned this lesson the hard way, but Zaran feared it would not be the last time the galaxy learned the true power of humanity. In the depths of space, the final remnants of the Drexian fleet drifted away, defeated, broken. The humans had proven their might, and the universe would now be forced to reckon with their strength. The era of the Drexian Empire was over, and in its place, a new age had begun, the age of humanity. Zaran's thoughts were heavy as he ordered the retreat. His fleet was broken, and their dominance over the galaxy had ended. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but the truth was undeniable. The rise of humanity had rewritten the rules of the galaxy, and there was no turning back. As the last Drexian ship limped away, Zaran looked toward the human fleet one final time. He had witnessed their power firsthand, and he knew that they would no longer be underestimated. Humanity had ascended, and the galaxy would be theirs to shape. The battle for the stars had only just begun, but now, the galaxy's deadliest species had learned the true meaning of fear. The human ships that had once seemed outclassed by the might of the Drexians now sailed through space like champions. Their confidence was undeniable. It was clear that they had not only overcome a great enemy, but had gained something far more valuable: respect. Respect that would echo throughout the galaxy for centuries to come. Zaran's mind swirled with thoughts of the future. The Drexians had failed to conquer Earth, and the humans had made it clear that any attempt to challenge them would result in catastrophic consequences. The galaxy had been forever changed by this encounter, and the Drexians were not the ones who would control its fate. Humanity would rise, and they would shape the galaxy in their image. As the human fleet moved through the void, Zaran understood something crucial. The rise of humanity was not just an event. It was a turning point, a moment when everything that had been assumed about the balance of power in the galaxy was shattered. The humans were no longer just survivors. They were conquerors in their own right, and they had proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Back on Earth, the news of their victory spread like wildfire. Across the planet, people rejoiced. Their bravery, their ingenuity, and their ability to adapt in the face of overwhelming odds had led them to victory. Earth was no longer just a speck in the vastness of space. It was a symbol of hope, strength, and determination. The galaxy would soon know the name of humanity, and it would be impossible to forget. As Zaran stood on the bridge of his crippled ship, he knew that the galaxy would never be the same. The humans had awakened, and their message had been clear. They would not be silenced, they would not be conquered, and they would fight for their place in the stars. The Drexians had learned this lesson the hard way, but Zaran feared it would not be the last time the galaxy learned the true power of humanity. In the depths of space, the final remnants of the Drexian fleet drifted away, defeated, broken. The humans had proven their might, and the universe would now be forced to reckon with their strength. The era of the Drexian Empire was over, and in its place, a new age had begun, the age of humanity. Zaran's thoughts were heavy as he ordered the retreat. His fleet was broken, and their dominance over the galaxy had ended. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but the truth was undeniable. The rise of humanity had rewritten the rules of the galaxy, and there was no turning back. As the last Drexian ship limped away, Zaran looked toward the human fleet one final time. He had witnessed their power firsthand, and he knew that they would no longer be underestimated. Humanity had ascended, and the galaxy would be theirs to shape. The battle for the stars had only just begun, but now, the galaxy's deadliest species had learned the true meaning of fear.